Welcome to Nick's Scary Stories. Tonight, we're heading to the misty streets and gaslit balconies of New Orleans, Louisiana, a city soaked in history, mystery, and spirits that never left. These 5 haunted house stories come straight from local residents who live to tell the tale. But not everyone does. Some still hear footsteps on the stairs, feel cold fingers on their backs, or wake up to voices that don't belong to anyone living. Stay until the end and let us know which one you think is real, or which one might have followed you home. Now turn off the lights, unless you're too scared, because story number 1 starts now. Story 1. The Attic That Screamed. Location: Garden District, New Orleans, Louisiana, 2019. It was 2019 when Eva and her husband Julian bought the old house on Prytania Street. A pale blue Victorian with cast iron railings, mossy bricks, and a crooked smile for a porch. Locals called it the Screamer. But the couple, new transplants from Chicago, just thought that was Southern gossip. They were wrong. The place had been on the market for over a year. Real estate agents said it needed work. Electrical problems, sagging beams, bad insulation, but nothing about ghosts. Eva was the first to notice it. On their first night, while unpacking dishes in the kitchen, she heard something from the floor above. A long, low moan, like wind twisting through a pipe. "Did you hear that?" she asked Julian. "Hear what?" he said, tossing bubble wrap into a box. She paused, her head tilted toward the ceiling. Nothing. Thought it was the wind. But it wasn't. That night, around 3:17 a.m., Eva jolted awake. She didn't know why at first, until she realized her ears were ringing. Not from sound, but silence. The entire house felt vacuum-sealed, like something was holding its breath. Then the scream came. From the attic. It wasn't human. Not really. It was too long, too wet, like metal being torn apart underwater. Eva sat bolt upright. The sound stopped. She didn't say anything to Julian. Not that night. But the next day, while walking past the stairwell, she noticed something strange. At the top of the attic stairs, a single dusty footprint, barefoot, pointed down at her. She stood frozen, phone in hand, until Julian came home. She showed him. He laughed. "It's probably just some raccoon. Or the inspector." "Then why is it barefoot?" she whispered. That night, Eva didn't sleep. She kept her phone flashlight trained on the attic door. At 3:17 a.m. again, the doorknob rattled. Just once. Soft. Like someone trying not to wake her. They called a contractor the next morning. A man named Dwight who'd worked in the Garden District his whole life. When he arrived, he took one look at the house and said, "Prytania Screamer, huh? You know this place?" Julian asked. Dwight shrugged. "Worked on it 20 years ago. Back when it was a halfway house." Eva's stomach turned. "For what?" "People who saw things," he said. "Heard things. Screamed at things no one else could see." Julian scoffed, but Eva stared up at the attic window. "I'll patch up the wiring," Dwight said. "But if you hear her again, don't answer." "Her?" He didn't explain. Later that week, Eva found an old wooden cross nailed inside the attic doorframe. When she asked Julian if he wanted to take it down while repainting, he shook his head. "Let's leave it, just in case." But it didn't help. That weekend, Eva woke to find Julian standing at the bottom of the attic stairs. Eyes open. Still asleep. When she touched his shoulder, he whispered, "She wants you." Then he collapsed. Julian didn't remember anything about the night he sleepwalked to the attic stairs. Not the whisper. Not the trance. He insisted he was dreaming. But Eva wasn't convinced. Especially after she found the mark. It was the next morning, after breakfast. He pulled off his shirt in the bathroom, about to step into the shower, when Eva saw it, 3 thin red lines running down his back. Not scratches. Not random. Perfectly spaced. As if something had gripped him. She reached out and touched one. He winced. "That hurts," he said. "What the hell is that?" "You tell me," she whispered. They decided to stay at a hotel for a few days just to clear their heads. But on the second night, Eva received a strange call on her cell. No caller ID. Just static. Then a voice. Faint. A whisper under the hiss. "Come back upstairs." She dropped the phone. They returned to the house with a plan. Call a paranormal investigator. Not because they believed. Not really. But because they were desperate. Her name was Marla, and she arrived wearing a wide-brimmed hat, thick silver rings, and a camera around her neck. She didn't waste time. Walked straight to the attic stairs, placed her hand on the doorknob, and froze. "You already let her out," she said. Eva's skin went cold. "What do you mean?" Marla looked over her shoulder. "You opened the attic?" Julian nodded slowly. Then it's not the attic anymore, she said. It's the whole house. That night, Marla set up EMF detectors in every room, left audio recorders running, burned sage and placed protective salts across the thresholds. Then she sat cross-legged on the floor and began whispering in Creole. For an hour, nothing happened. Eva and Julian sat on the couch, waiting. Then every door in the house slammed shut, at the same time. The EMF reader in the kitchen spiked so hard it exploded. Marla stood and shouted something in French, threw a handful of ash into the air, and yelled, "Out! Now!" A long groan came from the ceiling. Not the attic. The walls. Marla backed up slowly, then told them, "It's mimicking your memories. That's why she sounds familiar. It's not just haunting you, it's becoming you." Julian laughed nervously. "That's not possible." Marla looked him dead in the eye. "Then why did it answer your phone last night?" He blinked. "I never told anyone that." Eva stepped back, covering her mouth. "You need to leave this house," Marla said. "Tonight." So they did. They packed 2 bags, took only what fit in the car, and drove across the river to a friend's apartment in Algiers. The next morning, Eva returned with Marla just to grab her laptop and photo albums. She left Julian behind. When they pulled up to the house, the front door was ajar. Inside, everything looked exactly as they'd left it, except for the attic. The door stood wide open, staircase revealed, and at the top, a silhouette. A woman, back turned, hair hanging long and dark down her spine. Just standing. "Julian?" Eva called, confused. But Julian was at the apartment. She'd spoken to him an hour earlier. Then the figure turned its head. Not all the way. Just slightly. Enough for Eva to see part of the face. It was her. She ran. That night, they paid movers to clear out the house. They never went back inside. Everything was done through a third-party service. The house was listed again a month later. Then pulled. Then relisted for free. No one stayed longer than a week. Locals say sometimes you can still hear her scream. Right at 3:17 a.m. Sometimes it's from the attic. Sometimes it's from the phone. But either way, she's always listening. Story 2, The Room with No Air. Location, French Quarter, New Orleans, Louisiana, 2007. Welcome back to Nick's Scary Stories. If you haven't liked and followed yet, now's the time, because what you're about to hear is not just unsettling, it's dangerously real. This second story takes us deep into the French Quarter, into a historic apartment that seemed like a dream, until one door refused to open and one man found out why. Let me take you back to the summer of 2007. Robert, a 32-year-old web designer, had just signed the lease on a restored 1800s brick townhouse on Burgundy Street. You know the kind, high ceilings, gas lamps, spiral staircase, and those creaky wooden floors that sound like they're whispering secrets with every step. Robert had recently moved to New Orleans from Austin after a rough divorce and wanted a clean start. He fell in love with the charm of the quarter, the people, the jazz, the feeling that anything could happen at night. He never guessed how true that would become. The building was split into 2 units. Robert's was upstairs. The landlord, a soft-spoken older man named Jean, had lived on the first floor for 30 years. During the tour, Robert asked about a narrow door at the end of the upstairs hallway, a door that looked like it belonged on the deck of an old ship. Jean looked at it, then said simply, "That room stays locked." "Why?" "Storage," he said. "Too much humidity. Can't open it anymore. Nothing important in there." Robert didn't push. He had 3 other rooms and a full balcony overlooking the street. What more did he need? For the first few days, everything was perfect. Robert worked from home, took evening walks, met locals at the jazz bar on Rampart. But something strange started happening around the 3rd night. He'd wake up at exactly 3:03 a.m. Not from a nightmare. From stillness. The entire apartment would go quiet. No crickets, no cars, no wind. Just still. And every night when he sat up, he'd hear a sound from down the hall. It was faint. A dry, gasping inhale. Like someone trying to breathe in a room with no air. At first, Robert assumed it was an old pipe. Or the AC struggling. But the sound wasn't mechanical. It came in irregular patterns. Gasp. Pause. Gasp. And always, it came from behind the locked door. The morning after the 5th occurrence, Robert examined the door. It had no knob. Just a single rusted keyhole. He even tried peeking through it, but it had been stuffed with what looked like fabric, from the inside. That night he asked Jean again, "What's actually in that room?" Jean looked down. "No one goes in there. Not anymore." "Did someone die in it?" Jean didn't answer. Just said, "Don't open it. Not even if you find the key." That was enough to keep Robert away, for a little while. But the dreams began. Always the same. He was standing in the hallway facing the door. On the other side, a child crying, barely audible. And as he reached for the door in his dream, the crying would stop, and the air would leave his lungs. Like he was sinking into something thick, invisible, and ancient. One night, Robert woke up at 3:03 again. And this time, the door was open. Just a crack. Maybe 2 inches. He froze. The air smelled different, coppery old. He couldn't move. Couldn't blink. Just stared at the gap. And then, fingers wrapped around the edge of the door. Thin gray like wax. Robert screamed. The door slammed shut. He ran downstairs, banged on Jean's unit. Jean opened the door already dressed. "You opened it, didn't you?" "I didn't touch it." Robert gasped. "It was open when I woke up." Jean closed his eyes. She knows now. That morning, Jean packed and moved out. Left a letter in Robert's mailbox. "I tried to contain her. I thought the iron seals would hold. But once someone sees her, really sees her, she remembers them." Robert didn't wait. He called a moving service, packed what he could in one night and left the rest. He moved to Atlanta 2 weeks later. The apartment is still listed online. High ceilings. Restored balcony. Great location. 1 locked room. No one's lived there more than a month since. And every tenant? They leave at 3:03 a.m. Story 3, The Window That Waited. Location? Garden District, New Orleans, 1999. It started with a window that was never supposed to open. Not because it was painted shut or sealed with age. No, this window had been boarded up from the outside and nailed in from the inside. A perfect square of black wood, sun bleached around the edges, but untouched since the 1930s. And yet, one morning in 1999, it was open. This story comes from Nicole, who was a junior at Tulane at the time. She was renting a room in a large old home off Magazine Street in the Garden District, a crumbling mansion that had been turned into apartments for students and traveling artists. She loved it there. The creaky floors, the stained glass door, the way the rain hit the roof at night like soft applause. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor, with a perfect view of the giant magnolia trees out front. There was just one thing she didn't like. The boarded window. It was in the hallway just outside her room. Unlike the others in the house, this one wasn't decorative. It was tall, narrow, and sealed behind old wood slats. And though no one talked about it, Nicole noticed something odd. Every month, like clockwork, the landlord, a woman named Miss Ivy, would come upstairs and run her fingers along the boards. Sometimes she'd whisper. Once, Nicole thought she saw her sprinkle something into the cracks. Ash maybe. Or salt. Then, one Saturday morning, Nicole stepped into the hallway and saw light. The boards were on the floor. The window was open. No breeze. No sign of forced entry. Just the open pane, wide and waiting as if it had always been that way. She called Miss Ivy immediately. The landlord arrived in minutes, out of breath and shaking. She didn't ask how the boards came off. She didn't even look at Nicole. She just walked to the window, stared out into the street and muttered, "She's awake again." Nicole didn't ask questions. She figured it was some weird superstition, or maybe Miss Ivy was having a senior moment. Either way, the boards were nailed back up the next day. But that night, something changed. Nicole was brushing her teeth when she heard it. A tap. Then another. Then a long, slow scrape, coming from the other side of the wall. She leaned against the doorframe. Nothing. The scrape came again, lower this time like something dragging across the baseboard. She tried to sleep, but around 2 a.m. her room grew cold. Not cool, cold. Her breath fogged. Her fingers went numb. And then the tapping started again. Not from the wall. From the window inside her bedroom. She sat up. 3 taps. She looked. The glass was fogged over. But behind it, she could see the outline of a hand. Just the edge. Pale. Fingertips pressed to the glass like someone trapped between 2 worlds. Nicole screamed. Ran down the hallway. Banged on her neighbor's door. When they came to check, nothing. The window was shut. No handprint. No fog. Just an old pane of glass. Miss Ivy was called again. This time she didn't fix anything. She just sat Nicole down and told her the truth. Back in 1928, a girl named Lenora lived in the house. She was a night walker, what the older locals called people who wandered while dreaming. They'd find her sitting on the roof or in the street barefoot, whispering to things no one could see. One night, she vanished from her bed. They found her 3 days later in the neighbor's crawl space. Eyes scratched out. Face locked in a smile so wide it tore the corners of her lips. The only clue? The old window had been forced open. And behind it, in the dust, was a handprint. Small, pale, with 6 fingers. Nicole didn't stay long after that. But before she left, Miss Ivy asked her a question. "Did you look at her?" Nicole paused. "In the fog," Ivy said. "Did you look at her?" Nicole nodded. That's when Ivy pressed a coin into her hand. A dime wrapped in a red thread. "Keep this in your mouth at night," she said, "until the window stays dark again." Nicole never returned. But in an interview she gave last year, she said something that still haunts me. "I kept that coin in my mouth for weeks. Even swallowed it once by accident. But the night I stopped, I woke up to the boards on the hallway floor." Story 4. The Man in the Frame. Location: Treem, New Orleans, 2007. Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever seen a photo move? Not in a video. Not an animation or a filter. I mean a printed photo. Framed, still, unmoving, that suddenly doesn't look quite the same as it did a moment ago? Our next story comes from Louis, a retired Marine who moved to New Orleans in 2007 after losing his wife. He wanted quiet, healing, a simple life near the music and food that reminded him of home. He bought a small shotgun house in the historic Treem district. Narrow, colorful, full of charm. The kind of place with wood floors that creaked in the cold and shutters that banged when a storm rolled in. He loved it, until he found the photograph. It was tucked behind a drawer in the hallway, an old, faded photo inside a chipped black frame. The image showed a family seated on a porch. 3 people. A man in a dark suit, a woman in a white dress, and a child on the man's knee. All unsmiling like folks used to be in old pictures. But it wasn't the people that bothered Louis. It was the porch. It was his porch. The slanted rail. The cracked floorboard. The same hanging fern by the steps. He checked the back of the photo. No name. No date. Just a thumb smudge and the number 13 written in red ink. At first, Louis figured it was a coincidence. Maybe someone from long ago had lived here, taken the photo, and left it behind. But the more he looked at the man's face, the hollow eyes, the tight jaw, the less sure he became. Because Louis had a dream that night. He was on the porch, but not in the present. The wood was newer. The fern was gone. And sitting in his chair was the man from the photo. He was staring straight ahead, breathing slow, his hands resting on his knees. Louis called out, "Hey, this is my house." The man didn't move, didn't blink. Louis stepped closer. That's when the man smiled. Not wide, not friendly. Just the corners of his mouth twitching up like a marionette pulled by a hidden hand. Louis woke up sweating. He didn't think much of it until the next night, when he dreamed it again. Same porch, same man. This time, the woman stood behind him, holding the child. Again Louis approached. Again they smiled. Again he woke up drenched in sweat, his heart racing. It went on like this for a week. And each night they were closer to the front door. He tried burning the photo. Wouldn't catch. He tried throwing it in the garbage. Found it back in the drawer the next morning. Then the waking thing started. The porch light flickered every night at exactly 11:11 p.m. The rocking chair creaked even on windless nights. And one morning Louis swore he saw the child, just for a moment, standing by the mailbox before vanishing like mist. He called a local historian, a woman named Camille, who specialized in the neighborhood's legacy homes. She came by, saw the photo, and immediately went pale. "You need to get rid of this," she whispered. "Don't look at it anymore." Louis asked her why. She hesitated. Then she told him a story. In 1913, a family vanished from that same house. Man, wife, child. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just gone. Neighbors claimed they'd heard arguing the night before. Screams. Then silence. Some thought the man had murdered them and fled. Others whispered of photographic death. A belief in certain circles that spirits can bind themselves to images. That if a soul dies in rage or fear, it clings to the last captured echo of life. And if you find that image and you look too long, they see you too. Camille refused to touch the photo again. Louis tried burying it under concrete. The next night it was back, sitting upright on his nightstand. He finally took it to St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 and left it between the tombs. A friend told him salt and iron might keep the spirits at bay. That night was the first night he slept through the night in weeks. But just before dawn, a soft knock woke him. 3 taps. At the window. When he drew the curtain, no one was there. But the porch light flicked once. And on the rail was a black and white photo. Same porch. Only now there were 4 people. Story 5. The Bells of Baron Street. Location. Central City, New Orleans, 2022. You're about to hear a story that still gives me goosebumps, and it didn't happen in the past. It happened last year. Because not all hauntings linger in old black and white history. Some begin while the paint's still wet on the walls. This story was shared by a young woman named Elise, a barista by day, jazz violinist by night, who rented a newly renovated studio on Baron Street, a stretch of Central City where the houses lean in close and the shadows lean in closer. Now, Elise wasn't the kind to scare easily. She grew up in a noisy house, 5 siblings, never a quiet moment. So when she moved to New Orleans to chase her music, the idea of renting a quiet place above a shuttered antique store sounded like a dream. Big windows, old pine floors, a clawfoot tub in the corner, and bells, dozens of old bronze bells strung along the rafters like wind chimes. The landlord, an older man with a fading accent and one milky eye, told her not to touch them. They keep the silence clean, he said. Just let them ring when they want. She assumed he was being poetic or superstitious. It was New Orleans after all. But on her first night, she heard the bells. It was 3:04 a.m. She checked. They weren't tinkling like wind chimes. They rang one at a time. Clear, sure, deliberate. Ding, ding, ding. Then silence. Elise sat up in bed, her heart skipping. She lived alone. She checked the windows. Locked. No wind. No sign of movement. But the bells had definitely rung. Not randomly. In a pattern. Almost like they were calling something. She tried to ignore it. Blamed it on nerves. City sounds. But the next night it happened again. 3:04 a.m. 3 bells. Then footsteps from the floor below. Slow. Heavy. Wooden soled. She froze. The antique shop had been closed for years. The space was sealed. Empty. Her landlord told her the floorboards had rotted through and no one was allowed down there. But she heard it. Step, step, step. Then it stopped right beneath her bed. Elise grabbed her phone, flipped on the flashlight, and crept toward the hatch door that led to the lower stairwell. It was bolted shut. No one could have come up. No one could have moved below. Still, she placed her ear against the wood and heard breathing. Not hers. Not human. Like something pretending to sleep. She bolted upright, backed into her kitchen, and slept with every light on. The next morning, she visited the neighbor next door, an older woman who'd lived there since the 80s. Elise asked about the antique store. The woman shook her head. They shouldn't have rented that place again, she muttered. Too many stories. Too many girls. Elise's stomach dropped. What do you mean, girls? The woman didn't answer directly. Just pointed toward her own attic window. Sometimes when the wind's wrong, you can hear them crying. That night, Elise recorded the sound of the bells. When she played it back, it wasn't bells she heard. It was whispering. Dozens of layered whispers underneath the chime. And one voice that rose above them all. She opened it. Terrified, Elise called her landlord the next morning. Asked who lived there before her. The old man didn't speak for a long time. Then he sighed and said, "She was like you. Musical. Curious." She opened the trapdoor. Elise didn't respond. She hadn't even known there was a trapdoor. He continued, "The shop wasn't always antiques. Before that, it was a boarding house. For girls. During the war, there was a fire. They rang the bells for help. But no one came." Then he hung up. Elise packed her things that night. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she heard it again, from behind the wall. A bell. Then another. Then a voice. A girl's voice. Gentle. Desperate. "Please, don't shut the door again." She turned. The trapdoor was open. The apartment still sits empty today. And every few weeks, someone reports hearing bells on Baron Street, at 3:04 a.m. sharp. Just 3. Always 3.